Hi everyone, today I'm going to be harvesting all of our spring broccoli, and I'm pretty happy because it looks like this spring's harvest is going to be really good as opposed to last year when all of our broccoli starts were eaten by little critters. That did not happen this year, and I think it did help that we planted them in a raised bed that the voles could not climb up into, but either way the broccoli is looking really good, and I have I think like 6 or 7 heads to pick today, and they're all looking at the point where it doesn't look like they're going to get any bigger, and they're now at risk of the florets opening up and the quality is going to go down. So I want to pick them all today, and since I think it's going to be a good amount of broccoli, I'm also going to be preserving most of it just because I'm not sure that we can eat like 8 heads of broccoli in 1 week. I also have 2 other heads that I harvested earlier this week in the fridge, so it's going to be a lot of broccoli. So we'll do some preserving after the harvesting, but for now let me show you what we're working with. So all the broccoli is in this new Vego garden bed that we set up this spring. In the first half of the bed I have other big brassicas, so I have a couple of cabbage plants. Here is one that is starting to form the cone-shaped head of this variety, and then I have a couple of cauliflower plants, these 2 over here, but I haven't seen them start to develop a head yet. Oh, actually, look at that. There's a little cauliflower head. I just checked the other day and I didn't see anything. But yeah, that's looking really good. So that's gonna be on its way maybe later in the month. We'll be picking that. And then I also have a couple of Napa cabbage plants here that really look so eaten up by slugs and flea beetles. But yeah, that's the first half of the bed. And then in the second half of the bed is all of my broccoli plants. And most of them are a really nice size. But you can also see they're starting to kind of fade a little bit. Like this one is probably actually past its prime a bit. It's starting to kind of get a little bit brown, and it's starting to kind of open up a little bit. You can see how like some florets are taller, whereas usually I like it when they stay like really nice and uniformly round like this one. You can see that this one is not as far ahead as the other one, so this one is pretty nice. But again, just starting to maybe get a little bit of browning or yellowing, so I really want to grab these before they get too far. And here's another one. This one looks pretty nice, and they're all like really a pretty good size. I have a couple that I've already harvested just because they looked good a few days ago and I didn't want them to go too far. But I leave the plants intact after I harvest because usually for broccoli plants, after you harvest the main head, they'll form little shoots coming out of these little like armpits, and then you can get little almost like broccolini type shoots. So it's like a second bonus harvest. So don't pull your plants out too quickly unless you like desperately need the space. But I don't at this moment, so I'm going to leave the plants. And here are some of the other ones. This one looks nice. Oh, this one's really big. And then I just have one, here it is, this one, that's really small. So I don't know if maybe the plant start was a little smaller to begin with, but I don't know. I think I'll go ahead and pick it anyway just because it does look like it's gonna start petering out. So I'll pick it even though it's small so I can preserve everything all at once. All right, I just moved to the shade so I can talk a little bit about the broccoli before we get into harvesting. So for those who are curious, the variety is called Green Magic. It is a hybrid variety of broccoli, and I do really love this one. I've been growing it for a few years, and I always recommend this to people who are looking for a broccoli variety. If you've had trouble with broccoli forming like the head of the broccoli, because I've grown a few heirloom varieties of broccoli before where they just grow leaves and they don't form a head, but this one I have never had that issue. Even when my seedlings look like really weak and small, they always end up forming a head when it's time to harvest. Sometimes it can be a little small if like my seedlings aren't looking good, but usually it's a really nice large head for each plant. They do really well in the heat. We do live like kind of in the mid-south, so it does warm up for the spring and summer pretty quickly, and these ones don't seem to have an issue with the heat as long as you harvest them at the right time. Like I probably could have harvested these a few days to a week ago just because they are starting to diminish in quality, but they're still looking great. And I started these all from seed on February 7th. I transplanted them on March 18th, and today is June 3rd. So trying to do the math there. So like 4 months from seed to harvest. So yeah, I'm really happy with the variety. If you are looking for a good broccoli variety, try it out. Let me know how it does for you. But yeah, let's get to harvesting. like to make sure I harvest some of the stem as well because I do really like broccoli stems. As long as you take off like the rougher outer layer, the inside is so nice and tender, especially when it's homegrown, and it's actually one of my favorite parts of broccoli. So make sure you're getting some of that stem as well. I think these two are my biggest heads, so we've got to do a little head size comparison. Definitely a nice size. I don't know if they're the largest broccolis I've ever grown of this variety, but definitely very nice. And here is my whole basket of all of the broccoli that I just harvested. I think I'm gonna go ahead and soak this in some water just to make sure if there's any bugs or worms inside, they come out before I harvest, but really happy with this harvest. So after I got the broccoli all cleaned up, I got to work with the chopping and the preserving, and to do that I separate the tougher stalks from the florets. And for the stalks, I like to just cut around the outer edge where it can be a lot more fibrous and woody, and you should be able to tell the difference when you get to like the more tender inner part of the stem. It'll have a different color, and you'll also be able to feel with your knife. If it's tough to get through with your knife, you're definitely not going to want to eat that. So I just keep cutting around until it looks and feels good, and then from there I can chop up the edible parts and blanch it along with the florets. The stalk that is closer to the top of the florets, I usually don't peel all around those edges as long as it feels tender. And then for the florets, I'm just cutting them up into generally equal pieces just so everything will cook more evenly. And also, just to minimize any breakage of the florets, usually what I like to do is just cut on the stem part, and then I can kind of like pull apart the florets with my hands. That way you don't end up with a lot of like the floret crumbs, if you know what I mean. Here is the big bowl of cut up broccoli that I ended up with all of the broccoli that I harvested today, and I'm going to get to work on the blanching process. So I've got a pot of water, and I'm going to be blanching the broccoli in batches just to make sure I don't crowd the pot too much. So I'm just putting in the amount of broccoli where everything can kind of be submerged in the boiling water. I'm going to let the broccoli sit in the boiling water for maybe about a minute. I really go off of visual cues for this, and I just wait to see until the broccoli is like a really bright green color. That's
that's usually when I pull it out. And this is the same general blanching process for any vegetable you decide to do this with. And I really just go off of what things look like, and when it turns that really bright color, that's when I pull it out of the water. Broccoli is a little bit hardier, so you can do like 1 to 2 minutes, but sometimes I find that it really only takes like 30 seconds, so just use your gut. And after about a minute, I'm going to remove that broccoli and put it into an ice bath. This is going to shock the broccoli and stop the cooking process. After the broccoli has sat in the ice bath for a few minutes and everything has cooled down, I'm going to try and drain as much of the water off as possible and then lay it onto a towel to let it dry a little bit. And then I'm just going to repeat this process for my entire bowl of broccoli, doing the blanching for about a minute, putting it into a cold ice water bath, and then draining it onto my towel until I have finished with the entire bowl. And the reason I blanch the broccoli and a lot of other vegetables before freezing is because this breaks down the enzymes that can cause the vegetables to deteriorate while they are in the freezer. So you end up with a much nicer product when you go to cook it later on in the winter or whenever you decide to eat it. This process helps the broccoli to be a little bit firmer, so the texture is nicer, and I believe it also preserves the nutrients. I don't do this with all vegetables, but I think for broccoli it does really help, and I do find that homegrown and home preserved broccoli that I've blanched and frozen this way is a lot nicer than store-bought frozen broccoli. Usually store-bought frozen broccoli, I feel like no matter how you cook it, it's always like really mushy, and it kind of has that like unappealing, overcooked dark green color. But for the homegrown broccoli, it stays this really nice bright green color, and the texture is a lot better. Once I have everything all blanched and laid out on my towel, I do like to let this just sit and kind of like air dry just for, I don't know, maybe like half an hour. It helps also to have a fan running to try and evaporate some of that excess moisture. You can also blot it some more with another towel if you want to. And once I feel like it's generally pretty dry, I will start moving the broccoli onto a sheet pan and flash freeze that. And then once that's frozen, I will portion it out into my Ziploc bags. So from this session, I ended up with 6 quart-sized bags of homegrown and preserved broccoli for the freezer, which I'm really happy with. So that's it for today's harvest and preservation video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.